Great, thanks Shoshana. Hi everybody and welcome. If you haven't already, if you want to just update your name on Zoom, you can add your organization and where you are. It looks like we've got a pretty global group today, if I'm remembering where everyone is located, which is really exciting. So welcome to the Leaders Cafe. We're so glad to be able to continue these programs. And I just want to start by thanking Shoshana, Caitlin, and a number of alumni who aren't on right now for continuing to lead these Leaders Cafes. We appreciate it. And today we are very excited to have the World Monuments Fund with us to take us on a special tour of the Arch of Janus in Rome, Italy. A huge thank you to Beth, Kara, and Jonathan for being here. I'm going to start by introducing you to the World Monuments Fund and Dr. Jonathan Bell, who will be leading the tour today. For those of you who aren't familiar, the World Monuments Fund is a private nonprofit organization founded in 1965 by individuals who were concerned about the accelerating destruction of important artistic treasures throughout the world. Now, 55 years later, World Monuments Fund has orchestrated hundreds of projects around the world, with 90 projects currently active. Headquartered in New York City, the World Monuments Fund has affiliate offices in Britain, India, Peru, Portugal, and Spain, and a network of field representatives in Taiwan, Japan, the Middle East, Africa, and Cambodia. American Express is the founding sponsor of the World Monuments Watch, which is a global program launched in 1996. The watch aims to identify important cultural heritage sites and direct financial and technical support for their preservation. The Arch of Janus was actually on the watch list back in 2016. And this year, American Express gave $1 million to the World Monuments Fund to directly support 7 sites on the watch. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jonathan Bell, who came to the World Monuments Fund from the National Geographic Society, where he oversaw a large portion of projects that included archaeological research and cultural heritage. Over the course of his career, he has worked with the Getty Conservation Institute on World Heritage sites in China and Egypt, evaluated cultural site management from Kazakhstan to Colombia, and overseen strategic planning for large-scale flood infrastructure for the county of LA. Dr. Bell serves on multiple scientific committees as an expert member at the International Council on Monuments and Sites, and sits on the editorial board of the Journal of Architectural Conservation. He holds a BA from Harvard, a DEA from the Sorbonne, hope I'm saying that right, a master's in historic preservation from Columbia, and a PhD in urban planning from UCLA. So impressive. When I was reading that, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So thank you so much for being with us today, all of you, but especially you, Jonathan. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to take us on this tour.
Well, thanks so much, Rebecca, for that warm welcome, and sorry for all the mouthfuls there with the places I've been working and things I've been doing. But I want to take a moment to really thank American Express for inviting us to be here today and to have the opportunity to meet all of you and to take you on a journey to Rome, to lead you through the details and dedicated work of cultural heritage preservation. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be here, to come along with me on that journey for the next hour or so. Before we get started, we brought with us a short video on the World Monuments Fund that just quickly highlights who we are, what we do, and how we do it. But just before we cue that, I do want to reiterate that American Express has been a key partner of World Monuments Fund for decades now. And has really helped make possible a significant amount of our work and engagement in some of the world's most irreplaceable cultural places. So Rebecca, can we cue that short video?
The achievements of past generations nurture our souls, give us a deeper understanding of history and our place in it, and help us recognize the connections that make us all human. Since 1965, World Monuments Fund has partnered with local communities and governments in more than 600 locations on all 7 continents to honor their cultural heritage, helping to preserve it with traditional techniques as well as the latest science, creating economic opportunities and learning from one another. As we look to the future, Our collective heritage is an untapped resource that can fuel our imagination, creativity, and economy. Join us in our work creating a world that merges past and present, where local communities live in harmony with the monuments they've grown up around, and where a greater understanding of each other's cultures leads to a brighter and more compassionate world.
Great. Thank you. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a sense of who we are and what we do and what drives us. We're now going to spend our time together looking at an incredible monument of ancient Rome, the Arch of Janus. And what I want to do in the coming 40 minutes or so is highlight the work that the World Monuments Fund has done there to understand the monument's deterioration, the materials that compose it, and the solutions developed for its conservation. And all of this, of course, with the kind support of American Express. What we have is a video that highlights some of that work and really goes into some of the details. And so I thought it would be interesting today to look at that video, and we can break it down into sections so that we can look at pieces, look at some of the great visuals and some of the content of how this work is done. And then we'll come back together and I'll talk in a bit more detail about some of the approaches, some of the key lessons learned, and of course we can take any questions and discuss together. One note, most of the video is in Italian because we're working in Italy, as you can imagine. We do have subtitles, but so we'll all be practicing our Italian together. And there may be a few points where I kind of come in with a bit of a voiceover. So Rebecca, if you could start that. And I'll talk right here, actually. We're over the center of Rome, over the Tiber River. This is the Isola Tiberina. This is this island that sits in the middle of the river, and that is adjacent to the Arch of Janus and the Forum Barrio, which we'll be spending time at today.
The presence of the river was so important for the founding of the city of Rome that it was thought it was the sound rumon, that is, flow, that gave the city its name. It is not without good reason that the gods and men chose this place to build the city. A convenient river for transporting goods from overseas. A place close to the sea, but not exposed to foreign fleets. The four-sided monument, known as the Arch of Janus, was the only entrance to the city from the river, and the crossroads between the entrance to the Imperial Forums and the Boarium Forum. It was here that the temples of Hercules and Portunus were built, as well as the goddess Fortuna, the shrines of the great altar of unconquered Hercules, sanctioning the holiness of this place.
Stiamo restituendo il Foro Boario con un grande progetto di restauro, un luogo forse per un po' di tempo abbandonato, ma che oggi con i restauri del Tempio Rotondo, del Tempio Rettangolare e dell'Arco.
Sorry, did you say to stop?
Sorry, yeah, I know I jumped ahead, but we'll take advantage of this little break. Just to give you guys a sense of the location and what we've been looking at, and this is a perfect screen to stop on because I wanted to mention these two temples as well. So, as was mentioned, this is really a key part of Roman history. This is the site that was really the entrance to the seat of the Roman Empire from the river. And so this Forum Boarium, as it was called, is the site of a number of temples, and we have two of them in front of you right now. On the left, the Temple of Hercules, which is actually the oldest marble temple in Rome. It dates back to the 2nd century BCE, before Common Era. And on the right, the Temple of Portunus, which is dedicated to the god Portunus, who is the god of keys and ports. So that great transition from water to land to entering a new space and a new place. And they sit opposite the Arch of Janus, which we'll be coming to in a few minutes. But I want to mention that work at these two temples was also carried out with the support of American Express. And so we came to the Arch of Janus as kind of the last piece of this kind of triumvirate of this forum. So sorry, go ahead, Rebecca, and then you can take it to the next stopping point.
Restituirà il luogo più antico, quello delle leggende della fondazione di Roma, l'arrivo dei gemelli con la cesta sul Tevere. Quindi un luogo fantastico al centro della vita dei romani che attraversando l'arco quadrifronte potranno entrare nel Palatino, nel versante augusteo.
And I'll just talk over some of this, so don't stop it, but I'll just add some commentary. So as you can see the state of the arch. This is the close-ups of the Arch of Janus. You can see some of the decorative elements, which are really incredible, but you also see, of course, that there's a lot of deterioration, areas that are lost, a lot of plant growth, and a lot of challenges, areas of discoloration from biological growth. And we're going to go into some of these things and challenges over the course of this video and our discussions. Great. So I think you can see from that, this is really an incredible monument built in marble. And it's really unique for a number of reasons. It is an arch that is of the type called quadrifons. So it actually has 4 doorways, as you saw, and it's the last remaining arch of that type in Rome. So it's a very significant monument because it is really the last remaining. And another part of its story, which is very interesting as we think of the Forum Boarium and this composition of the 2 temples we spoke about a minute ago and the arch opposite them, is that it's much later. It actually was built much later than the other 2 monuments. So it was actually dates from the second half of the 4th century Common Era. So it's almost 600 years later than the Temple of Hercules. And but it highlights that how important this place and this forum was for all of that period of time throughout ancient Rome. And one of the key things to remember is that it really is the entrance to the power of Rome, to the Palatine Hill. We always hear of the forum and the seat of government on the Palatine Hill. That's behind this arch. So one really entered through it and entered into the seat of the Roman Empire in this way. Another interesting story about the arch is I think many people tend to think because it's called the Arch of Janus, they associate that with the god Janus, the Roman god, who you've probably seen on coins and in images. He's the double-faced god, the god of beginnings and entrances. And though there's a common etymology, it really in Roman times was just called Janua, which means a covered doorway or a gate and an entrance to a city. So it really highlights that this was the transition into what was the seat of power. The other aspect of the forum is that it was a cattle market. And so it was really a place where people came together, they mingled, they arrived. If they came off of the river, they arrived there, and goods were exchanged and people spent time there. So it was really a bustling part of the life of ancient Rome. At the very end, you saw those close-ups and some of the challenges and deterioration. So we're really going to spend time now on what those mechanisms of deterioration are and how we spent time to develop solutions to them. So Rebecca, I'll ask you to cue the next portion.
Nope.
We're having a conversation. Oh. Good, how are you?
Okay, right.
A very long time. What are you up to these days?
I'm working at the hospital on the side.
Oh, that's nice. What are you doing beside us?
Il nostro restauro ha interessato la metà del prospetto ovest dell'Arco di Giano, questo alle mie spalle, che è il prospetto principale dell'arco, quello che dà su Piazza Bocca della Verità, ed è partito dallo studio della storia del monumento e quindi tutte le vicende conservative che esso ha subito, nell'analisi dei materiali costitutivi con i quali è stato costruito, nell'analisi delle forme di degrado presenti sulla superficie ed infine sulla messa a punto della metodologia che poi dovrà essere adottata su questo che può essere definito un cantiere pilota, cioè un cantiere nel quale sono stati sperimentati anche dei nuovi materiali presenti sul mercato, metodologia che poi si spera possa essere riutilizzata per il restauro dell'intero monumento. Il degrado sulla superficie del marmo è principalmente dovuto all'azione congiunta dell'inquinamento atmosferico e dell'acqua piovana, che innesca una serie di reazioni di tipo chimico, fisico e biologico e quindi crea le varie forme di degrado che poi noi abbiamo studiato e osservato sulla superficie. La principale è quella della crescita della vegetazione superiore in tutte quelle che sono le lacune, le fenditure e anche nelle linee di giunzione tra i vari blocchi. Poi troviamo nelle patine, queste sono sia di colore brunastro e sono soprattutto di origine biologica, che invece più scure, le incrostazioni nere, che invece sono di origine chimiche. Troviamo in molte parti una decoesione del marmo e questo è dovuta all'azione dell'acqua piovana. Troviamo molti sollevamenti a scaglie del marmo stesso ed infine all'interno delle nicchie troviamo anche le cosiddette patine a ossalato di calcio che si sono create dalla trasformazione di sostanze proteiche in ossalato di calcio. Queste sostanze proteiche possono essere dovute o a dei trattamenti conservativi molto antichi a cui è stato sottoposto l'arco oppure anche a sostanze proteiche presenti nell'atmosfera e che poi si sono depositate sulla superficie e poi si sono trasformate in ossalati. Come dicevo, la metodologia è consistita principalmente nel consolidamento di tutte le parti.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk in this section a little bit about the conservation process and just give a bit of an overview of the different pieces and how we come to this. The first thing that we really need to understand, and this is what we talked a little bit about earlier, is the place, the site. Why is it important? Why is it significant? Understanding its context, its history, its use over time, and why the place continues to be important to people today. So that's really the first part of the research, understanding, doing that historical research and going back to archival sources and so forth. Then there's understanding the building itself. What is it? What is it composed of? What are the materials that have been used? what is the construction technology, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a subsequent section. And also, as you saw at the beginning of this piece, the digital model that was created. So that was an incredible way and a really important way to understand what this monument is, how its structure is composed. And then I don't know if you happen to notice that stairwell that was in part of it. That tells us also a bit about the history of the building and its use over time. So actually there was originally a roof with a penthouse built above what you see remains of the current building.
Oh my
And
God.
that was high. Just a little bit of chatter. That was something that was actually removed subsequently because it was understood to be something that was added, and actually it was original to the structure. And in fact, during medieval times, it was a very influential Italian family that lived there and kind of ran their operations from that penthouse. And so today all we have left is that internal stairwell that, again, as we get into the monument and map it, we learn these stories and learn how it was used and also how that use has impacted its condition and conservation over time. Another piece that I think is highlighted really well in this section is some of the challenges, some of the things that threaten these types of monuments, particularly the surfaces of stone. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about water. Water is always a challenge, something we fight against and we try to keep out of all buildings and structures. And it's definitely something that has taken its toll on the Arch of Janus. Another challenge here is the pollution that has really taken hold of Rome in recent centuries and has caused a lot of damage. Limestones and marbles, and this is a marble structure, are very impacted by pollution, by the acidity of pollution, and they actually get eaten away. And so what you're seeing, this is another perfect place, great job, Rebecca, for us to stop, because you're seeing here one of these sections, this is actually the surface of the stone that has been really damaged by pollution, acid rain, as we used to call it, and just airborne pollution. And it's created a crust that is then pulling away. And I think just in the next scene, you see a bit better, it's pulling away from the healthy stone underneath. And so the treatment here is actually to consolidate that, to reattach that back to that healthy stone. And then if we can do some cleaning, we would do that. But the other piece that was talked about here is the biological activity. And you saw in many of the images, the plants that are growing out, the bugs that are crawling around. Some of these have greater impact than others. And so we have to really treat that. And particularly talking about the surface, you have a lot of biological growth that discolors the surface, but can also actually eat away at the stone. And we'll get a bit more into that. So Rebecca, if you could do the next section, this is about 3 minutes long. Thanks.
Che si presentavano decoesionate e poi subito dopo nella pulitura, innanzitutto la rimozione di tutta la vegetazione superiore che abbiamo detto era molto presente sulla superficie dell'arco e poi la pulitura dalle varie patine.
Per quelle di origine biologica sono stati fatti dei trattamenti biocida mediante un prodotto specifico in grado di estinguere i cianobatteri presenti tramite degli impacchi di cleans di cotone a più riprese, completate poi da una rimozione meccanica con delle spazzole morbide. Mentre per le incrostazioni scure di origine chimica abbiamo scelto un prodotto di nuova generazione come supportante ad un sale di ammonio, che è un gel non tossico a base di un'alga marina, esente da materiali di sintesi e quindi ecosostenibile di nuova generazione e che non necessita di molta acqua per la sua asportazione.
E questo noi l'abbiamo considerato un grosso vantaggio perché avendo subito purtroppo molti danni l'arco dalla presenza che abbiamo detto dell'acqua, ritenevamo di non utilizzarla in eccesso per il nostro intervento di pulitura. Le stuccature hanno riguardato la chiusura di tutte le lacune, di tutte le fissure, di tutte le fenditure presenti sull'arco, ma anche in parte alla ricostruzione di quelli che erano i volumi originari dell'arco e che ormai sono andati perduti. Quindi l'operazione di stuccatura ha un ruolo sicuramente conservativo perché limita l'ingresso ancora una volta dell'acqua e dei depositi atmosferici all'interno della struttura dell'arco,
ma ha anche una funzione estetica in quanto aiuta nell'altura del monumento.
Queste stuccature sono state realizzate con delle calci idrauliche e idrate e utilizzando delle cariche che in qualche modo suggerissero il colore che ormai ha assunto il marmo nel corso dei secoli.
L'operazione infine che ha concluso il nostro intervento è stata l'applicazione di un protettivo idrorepellente già testato e utilizzato in altri monumenti come il Tempio di Portunus qui al Foro Boario.
Il contributo di Artelab al restauro dell'Arco di Giano, della parte sud-ovest, il pilastro.
Thanks, Rebecca. And so you can see some of the treatments that are taken for the surface in terms of thinking about consolidation, as I was talking about earlier, reattaching upper layers of the surface that have come away from the stone, removing the vegetation, of course, and then, of course, the cleaning of the surface. Part of that is for aesthetic purposes, and part of it, as I mentioned, is some of these biological growth and certain layers that can actually cause damage to the stone. So treating all of that. And then, of course, it's filling the cracks. As I talked about water earlier, we really want to keep water out of the monument, as you can imagine, with all of this kind of pockmarked look of the monument and all these open joints and whatnot. There's a lot of opportunity for water to get into the structure and cause all sorts of problems, including the growth of the plants we saw, and then the plants themselves, keep water and hold water in the monument. So a lot of challenges. One of the things I wanted to highlight that I think is brought up really nicely here is the idea that in conservation work, we have to really develop solutions for each site that we work on. And we can't just take wholesale approaches and formulae from one place to another, because the context is different, the deterioration is different, the needs are different. And so one of the things that was developed here that's really interesting is that algal gel that's mixed with ammonium chloride, and that's to remove that dark discoloration of the surface. And that was used because a lot of the other more typical treatments involve water. They're mixed with water, they're applied with water, and then they're removed again with water. And there was a lot of concern about introducing more moisture into the structure. So this approach was developed, and it was really quite successful. So it just ties into the fact that one really needs to look at each monument for itself and understand its context and its needs. At the same time, we also learn lessons from work we've done in the past. And I hope you notice that at the very end of this, there was mention of the application of a water repellent coating that had also been used on the Temple of Hercules here in the Forum Boarium. So again, that had been used. We saw that worked well. It had good success. And that was something that could be applied to this monument as well. And so it was used here. In the next section, we're going to go into a little bit more of the analysis of the stone and structural consideration. It's a bit longer, but I thought I'd also, if it makes sense, entertain any questions. If there's anything that's come up, burning question thus far. I'm not quite sure if we're going to get this through the chat or if people can speak up.
Yeah, so Westner had a question just where the arch is in relation to the Colosseum, which I don't know if we want to go back to the beginning just to kind of point out the Colosseum. I'm not sure if we did that.
Yeah, we could do that. We can also, at the end, we're going to have another kind of aerial view, and we could point it out then. But either way, Perfect. We can jump back. But it's basically the Palatine Hill is behind the arch and up above, and then to the side of the Palatine Hill is where the Colosseum is. I'm not quite sure how long it is walking, but it's not really all that far.
Side note, I was lucky enough to be in Rome and I walked from the Colosseum to the arch. It wasn't far.
Okay. we have proof.
But yeah, at the end, when there's another one, that makes sense if that works.
Yeah, and I'll try to remember to point it out. Anything else before we get into the stone, the marble, and the structure? Okay, maybe we can roll that. Thanks, Rebecca.
Può, diciamo, sintetizzare in 3 fasi. La prima, fatta insieme ai restauratori, ha riguardato lo studio delle patine di origine biologica, che sono le forme di alterazione che interessavano gran parte dei marmi, e quindi sono state fatte delle indagini per la caratterizzazione e individuazione delle patine, che sono risultate composte essenzialmente da cianobatteri endolitici capaci di scavare all'interno dei cristalli e all'interno dei marmi, creando...
And I'll just talk over this, don't stop it, but this is the biological activity that actually gets into the pores of the stone. And so you don't just have that surface growth, but it actually gets into the rock and causes damage. One has to develop treatments for that.
Dopo l'esame macroscopico sono stati prelevati dei campioni, e questi campioni in laboratorio sono stati esaminati al microscopio e spesso allestiti in sezione lucida stratigrafica o sottile stratigrafica, in maniera da evidenziare i rapporti tra il substrato lapideo e gli strati di alterazione, spesso numerosi e sovrapposti. Quindi questo è stato utile poi per predisporre il progetto di pulitura e anche la selettività della pulitura stessa. La terza fase ha riguardato invece, una volta terminata la pulitura, lo studio delle caratteristiche litologiche di tutti i blocchi in maniera sistematica, tenendo conto anche delle alterazioni sia strutturali, quindi le fratture, e considerando anche l'influenza delle caratteristiche intrinseche delle rocce, dei marmi, come la cistosità, la fogliazione, cioè delle zone di debolezza preferenziale, l'interferenza di queste caratteristiche rispetto al carico, e quindi anche di valutare se i blocchi erano stati utilizzati correttamente con le linee di debolezza perpendicolari al carico, oppure al contrario con le linee di debolezza parallele al carico, ciò che ha favorito in molti casi il crearsi di scagliature e fratture. Questa fase qui di caratterizzazione litologica è stata poi sintetizzata in una mappa litologica di tutti i blocchi, dove è stato possibile definire 3 tipi di materiali identificati su base autoptica. Uno nettamente prevalente è quello che viene definito marmo proconnesio, che veniva estratto nell'isola di Marmara, attuale Turchia. L'altro è il marmo lunense, estratto nel bacino di Carrara. Una terza tipologia, che costituisce 2 o 3 blocchi, poteva essere sia compatibile col marmo proconnesio, oppure con una tipologia di marmo estratto nell'isola di Tassos, o altri marmi a granamide grossolana.
Lo studio del monumento si è concentrato essenzialmente su una prima analisi storica per capire le varie vicissitudini che avevano interessato l'edificio, e quindi una mappatura completa, blocco per blocco, di tutto il materiale lapideo esterno che riveste il corpo dell'arco. Questo ha permesso di restituire il danneggiamento di tutti gli elementi strutturali, di mappare il quadro fessurativo e di andare ad individuare punto per punto gli elementi di crisi strutturali dell'edificio. Infatti l'Arco di Giano è un monumento che si presenta solido, forte, estremamente robusto, ma andando a indagare i singoli elementi e andando nel dettaglio si vede che ci sono degli elementi di sofferenza puntuale. L'elemento estremamente interessante emerso nel corso degli studi strutturali è che questi blocchi lapidei erano a tutti i livelli interconnessi, sia a livello orizzontale sia a livello verticale, attraverso dei perni metallici. Identicamente seguivano la stessa tecnica i romani per incolonnare i rocchi delle colonne. La presenza di questi elementi metallici, essendo di gran valore, soprattutto dopo la caduta dell'impero romano, ha fatto sì che nel corso dei secoli venissero depredati completamente nella parte inferiore del monumento tutti i perni che erano esistenti. E similmente a come vediamo oggi nei grandi buchi che troviamo nel Colosseo, anche nell'Arco di Giano troviamo una grande quantità di vuoti e quindi dei vuoti strutturali che hanno ridotto le superfici di contatto tra i blocchi. In terzo luogo, e questo è un elemento ancora più delicato, abbiamo notato proprio perché all'interno della stessa costruzione c'erano dei perni metallici anche a livello della voltabotte che collegavano tutti i blocchi. Questi perni, avendo più di 2 secoli ed essendo disposti negli ultimi 20 cm dello spessore del blocco, sono stati oggetto di una corrosione espansiva, per cui il metallo, dilatando, sebbene fosse stato conglobato da una colatura di piombo, ha creato dei fenomeni locali di espulsione del blocco nella parte esterna. Per questo motivo si è subito intervenuto con un intervento di urgenza, andando innanzitutto a rimuovere le porzioni di blocco lapidio in imminente pericolo di caduta. Si è quindi proceduto facendo una grossa pulizia con diserbo e stuccatura delle lacune più gravi per evitare l'ulteriore danneggiamento dei blocchi ed infine la presenza di quei blocchi che rischiavano l'imminente caduta ma che non era il caso di asportare immediatamente. Questa configurazione strutturale è stata bloccata attraverso l'utilizzo di piattine di piombo e di ottone aventi lo scopo di ricostruire almeno in parte il contrasto esistente tra i blocchi lapidei. La seconda fase dell'intervento prevederà appunto la messa in sicurezza completa e la puntuale ricollocazione dei blocchi lapidei rimossi e il fissaggio dei blocchi esistenti.
So I hope you can all see the amount of work that goes into all of this, you know, and really trying to understand the building materials and how they work together. Requires taking samples to identify the stone, taking them into the lab to really understand what's causing deterioration on the surface, and then on site, looking at the building itself and trying to understand areas where there are certain weaknesses, areas where there may have been something that's done to the building that has changed its strength, and really seeing how everything kind of fits together, or in some cases where it doesn't and where something has changed. Um, I don't think I mentioned that the building is built of spolia. So this means that this was actually composed of stone that had come from other monuments across Rome and potentially elsewhere. So unlike some of the monuments that you may be familiar with, where all the rock was quarried, it came from one place, it's of a similar type, here that's not the case, and they've been taken from different monuments that were built at different times and from different locations. And so you saw that mapping, that lithographic map that shows the types of stones, where they are in the building, how they relate to each other, and what some of the differences are. And so that's a really important step to understand kind of how the building has come together and what the different components are. Another aspect here is, as I talked about before, understanding the life of the building, what changes have happened over time and what's kind of been done to the building. And so one of the key things that we see, perhaps one of the first things when you see the monument, is this pockmarked character that it has. And a big part of that is because of the metal linchpins that were used. So as was highlighted in this section, each of the blocks is connected to all the blocks around it with these pieces of metal, which really shows to the construction quality and also to the fact, perhaps the contribution to why it's still standing and why it has lasted as long as it has. But over time, in years past the Roman Empire, those pieces of metal were considered very valuable. And so people went in and dug them out. And that, of course, has caused problems where you suddenly have holes in the building you didn't have before. Again, water, as we've talked about, water gets in, causes problems. But also you're now missing these key pieces that actually hold the stone together and contribute to the structural integrity of the building. So that's a big challenge because you have pieces of stone that may be ready to fall, that are really just held by habit and gravity. And won't react to seismic activity in the same way and other types of stresses and loads. And then, of course, additionally, one of the key things you have to do when you approach a monument like this is really look at, are there any kind of imminent dangers? And of course, they looked at places where stone was loose, stone could fall. That, of course, could be a great danger to any people walking by. So have to stabilize those, remove them, replace them, or do something in an emergency way to just make sure that no one gets hurt. Any questions related to this part of the piece?
You can also unmute if you have a question, or feel free to put it in the chat at any point.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can still hear me. Sorry, a phone call came in at the exact wrong moment. I was wondering, Jonathan, if you could talk to us a little bit about why the different types of stone matter. What is the purpose and significance now?
Sure, and thanks for that. Yes, it is important because, as I said, having these different types of stone that have come from different places and are themselves they have different characteristics, different physical and chemical characteristics, which means that they also have different vulnerabilities and different reactions to various mechanisms of deterioration. So it helps to explain why you may have one block that is really deteriorated, falling away, crumbling away, whereas the one next to it is in rather good condition. And it also helps to highlight where there may be challenges that appear because you have rocks of different quality that are right next to each other. And so how do we address that? Do we need to replace one of these stones perhaps, or do we need to think about some sort of isolation layer between them? But it's a key part of understanding how the building has come together and then why certain types of deterioration are happening. So thanks for that. Any other questions before we go on? We're going to come to the roof now. Okay, so maybe we can jump in.
Che è venuto immediatamente in risalto è stata l'individuazione in copertura di una serie numerosa di lesioni con degli andamenti specifici che mettevano in risalto la totale mancanza di giunti tecnici di dilatazione dell'intera superficie di copertura. Questa superficie omogenea, spessa anche nell'ordine di 20-25 cm, è una massa totalmente esposta al sole e al freddo che subisce, anche se poco, delle dilatazioni termiche e non avendo avuto in fase di realizzazione dei giunti di movimento si sono venute a realizzare queste spaccature in parte nella zona centrale e parallele alle facce, in parte lungo le diagonali della copertura, quindi sulle linee di spluvio. Queste spaccature hanno fatto sì che con il tempo molte infiltrazioni passassero anche gli strati di impermeabilizzazione realizzati al di sotto di questa, tant'è che abbiamo verificato che in facciata, proprio all'attaccatura del coronamento, ci fossero su tutti e quattro i prospetti delle enormi fuoriuscite di acqua. Fuoriuscite di acqua che si sono riscontrate anche molto al di sotto della struttura di coronamento, il che significa che l'impermeabilizzazione sottostante ha nel tempo perso la sua capacità e quindi ha creato delle infiltrazioni anche all'interno del monumento. Per cui l'intervento immediato che è stato fatto è stato quello di realizzare un allargamento di tutte quante queste lesioni in copertura, non solo a livello perimetrale e intermedio, ma anche lungo tutte le linee di spluvio. Il giunto tecnico in copertura è stato realizzato andando ad allargare la lesione esistente. All'interno della lesione, dopo l'aspirazione delle polveri dovute ai residui di lavorazione, è stata passata un primer con presenza di resine acriliche capaci di fissare la superficie. Successivamente è stata stesa all'interno della lesione un cordolo di schiuma poliuretanica espansa estrusa che ha il compito di assorbire le dilatazioni, quindi fa sostanzialmente da ammortizzatore del movimento. Questo cordolo è stato poi annegato all'interno della lesione con una guaina liquida bituminosa che viene solitamente utilizzata per la chiusura delle strutture in cemento armato laddove ci sono anche sostanze chimiche presenti. L'intervento ha sicuramente diminuito del 95% le infiltrazioni all'interno, diciamo, della calotta di protezione, andando a proteggere quindi quei danni relativi allo scorrimento interno delle acque e all'ossidazione dei perni in ferro.
So you'll remember that I mentioned there was once upon a time a kind of penthouse up above this with another roof. And so when that was taken down in sometime in the 19th century, then this new roof was put on, and I'm not quite sure how it was done. We don't have all the documentation on that. But then, of course, you have challenges now where you have this new surface that is serving as the roof, and it was not set up in a way to expand and contract with heat and cold as every material does, including stone and all the mortar that's in there. And so over time, these cracks developed. And so this was, one of the key things was to make sure that, again, water is the big challenge. And what is a roof for, if not to keep out precipitation and keep out the elements? So how to do this and make sure that the existing roof as it was, which is still part of the history of the building, even though it's a later history, could continue to serve its purpose while solving this problem or addressing this problem of the cracks that were letting water infiltrate into the structure. So this was the idea of using the existing cracks to introduce expansion joints that would allow the roof to naturally, along the same lines that it's already reacted to heat and cold, and then work effectively to keep moisture out. And this, I just wanted to bring up this concept because this ties into a key concept of conservation, which is, doing as much as is necessary to keep the structure safe and whole and intact for future generations, but also doing as little as possible. So, that's another reason for not just changing the whole roof if it's not really necessary. And so that's a key approach that we have. We want to keep that historic fabric intact as best we can. So with that, we'll go to, I guess, the very last part, which is just another minute, a little over a minute, and gives us some of that scenic place. And I'll try to point out the Colosseum as well, and then we can take some more questions.
Nation avuta dal War Monument Fund ci ha consentito un primo step di studio integrale della situazione dell'arco. Stiamo aspettando un finanziamento globale per l'Arco di Giano. Abbiamo oggi numeri, quantità e previsioni di spesa, ma anche un progetto esecutivo, dei laboratori di tante professionalità, tante materie, dalle strutturali alla conservazione delle superfici, a una manutenzione che non potrà mai essere ignorata se vogliamo conservare l'esito positivo dei lavori di restauro e presentare a Roma dei monumenti sani e protetti proprio anche per l'effetto nocivo dell'inquinamento. Il piano di recupero del Foro Boario in realtà si lega a un evento che è quello anche della riapertura a Roma di un centro per le arti sperimentali di Alda Fendi, quindi in attesa di un finanziamento che ci consenta con un tempo rapido di poter esaurire il restauro del Tempio e unirlo al Tempio di Ercole, al Tempio di Portuno, oggi ultimati, e restituire ancora al Foro Boario una nuova vita, soprattutto reinserirlo nel circuito di visita della città di Roma, unendolo anche al fascino del vicino Tevere.
And so as we pull out, you should see the Colosseum to the upper right here. Sorry, straight up. Yeah, there it is. You see it there in the center. Top.
Restoring an ancient crossroads. It is also the threshold to cross.
Great. So I hope that gave you a sense of both the Arch of Janus and its location, its importance, and how it ties into this larger context of the Roman Empire and the ancient seat of that power. Another piece that I just wanted to mention really quickly is, as was being said at the very end of the video, tying all these monuments together. We've kind of worked monument by monument, but there was a greater plan here to really revive the Forum Boarium, and highlight its importance throughout Roman history, and tie it into also some schemes of sustainable tourism, tying it into Experimental Arts Center, and making sure that more people come to see it and understand its importance when they visit some of the other monuments across the city. So I will stop there, and I don't know if we have how much time we have for questions. I know we have another little video as well, but I'll turn it over to you, Rebecca.
Yeah, so no other questions in the chat, just lots of thanks for some people who had to hop off. Gary, oh, yeah, go ahead, Gary.
I do have a question, and thank you so much, Jonathan, for your presentation. Very interesting, truly. I was just wondering if you could speak just briefly about how it was determined that the penthouse that was removed during the 19th century, that it was determined that it actually was not a later accretion, but was actually part of the original arch?
Sure. There's some early documentation, drawings of the Fotobarrio, and I forget exactly when they're dating from. I can't say that they date to, the date of construction, but they're within 200 years or so. And so it showed that roof and that upper section was part of the building from an very early stage. I think the other key point to remember is that there's that internal staircase that had to go somewhere. And it's not typical to, on these sorts of monuments, build that just for access to the roof. So that ties into kind of telling the full story.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Oh. Sorry, go ahead, Jonathan.
No, I was just going to say, so I know that we have another video, if we have time, which I think is only about a few minutes long, that highlights kind of another aspect and further addition of the work of the World Monuments Fund that we want to share with everyone. But I want to thank all of you for this opportunity before that kicks off, and I hope that this brightened your day a bit and brought some new information to you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Hopefully everyone can stay on. It's not too long.
What people build, those sites that years, centuries, or millennia later continue to inspire awe, wonder, and a deeper appreciation of what it means to be human, reflect the soul of the world. Today, age-old threats such as erosion, natural disasters, and violent conflicts, and truly modern ones like climate change and accelerating urbanization, are threatening these irreplaceable symbols of our global identity like never before. This is why every 2 years, World Monuments Fund partners with local communities around the world to shine a light on 25 at-risk sites that marry great historical significance with contemporary social impact. This is the 2020 World Monuments Watch. At Rapa Nui National Park in Chile, the people of Easter Island are concerned that their sacred petroglyphs may be lost. Because of erosion, they are at risk of falling into the ocean. The community wants to collaborate with the best experts to find solutions.
Easter Island is remarkable not only in terms of what a significant and unique site it is, but that the true stakeholders, the community to whom the site belongs and to whom the site has meaning, are the leading force behind its preservation and current and future initiatives to make sure that the site is well managed.
At Utah's Bears Ears National Monument, de-designation will cause cultural heritage to be pillaged, roads to be built, and sacred sites of a tribal council to be lost.
It's really important, I think, to recognise that the Indigenous values of any country are often undocumented, unknown, unseen, and sometimes silent. In the case of Bears Ears, where we have many, many thousands of sites in that area, looking after them as a whole, looking after them as a national park, is a really important process to go through.
In India's Deccan Plateau, the local community faces a different challenge. Water is scarce, and traditional systems can offer solutions, but these time-tested structures will disappear if not restored.
There's a gross inequity that's taking place in terms of access to water. So how can we respect and honor traditional knowledge so that we can be more community conscious in the way we safeguard the planet?
In Uzbekistan, the stories of the former Jewish community of Bukhara could be lost forever. The majority of Jews began leaving in 1991, but the homes where they lived and the synagogues where they prayed remain. Local partners want to work with us to find solutions to preserve those memories.
One probably wouldn't think of Jewish culture in Uzbekistan or in Central Asia, and I think that's important, to look at the diversity of places and the fact that what we want to preserve is the heritage of a pluralistic, multifaceted, dynamic community and not a monolithic thing.
In San Antonio, Texas, the challenge is of a different kind. Here, there's a struggle between competing memories. The San Antonio Woolworth building is at risk of being lost in a redevelopment plan involving the nearby Alamo. In both cases, the significance lies not so much in the architecture, but in the momentous events that happened within their walls. The Woolworth building was one of the first places to peacefully integrate its lunch counter during the civil rights movement.
We don't have to choose one thing over another. What we're trying to do is to help people discover cultural richness. It's about how many periods and many communities and many ideas come together to make a place unique and a place valuable to many different people.
In Peru's sacred valley of the Incas, the local community wants to be included in the conversation about a new airport that will allow more tourists to visit their region, but will also jeopardize their rich cultural landscape. We must work to find a balance to allow more people to discover the world's treasures while not destroying them.
This is a very significant valley, full of historical sites, archaeological sites, ancient Inca roots. The advantage that the watch has there is to shine a light on thinking about how regional planning should proceed.
The 2020 World Monuments Watch includes little-known places and universally recognized icons. They span 21 countries and date from prehistory to the 20th century. What they all have in common are local communities who want to act, and they need all of our help. World Monuments Fund has committed to work with them to create awareness and craft sustainable solutions. We invite you to join us in saving irreplaceable treasures and creating a more inclusive world. Using our voices, knowledge, passion, and resources to protect these places has never been more important. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I know we're just over, but a huge thank you, Jonathan. That was so fascinating. As I mentioned, I was there by myself. I really wish I knew like even this much of that information before I was there in person, but wow, just incredible. Really appreciate the time. Really appreciate you all joining. I did put into the chat the site, the websites, and some links to World Monuments Fund. As you can see, they do such important work all over the world. So there's lots more to learn. And I just also want to let you know, there will be an invitation if you didn't see it yet for next week to join a conversation with the American Express CEO. So sign up for that if you're interested. And we'll have one more Leaders Cafe of 2020 in November. So look out for that. So thank you again to World Monuments Fund and to all of you for joining. Have a good rest of your day.